In the shadow of the dense evergreen forest lies a small, forgotten town named Hollow Creek. Nestled at its edge is Silent Hollow Lake, a serene body of water with an ominous reputation. For decades, locals have whispered about its dark past, stories of people vanishing without a trace, their final footprints leading straight into the icy depths. The most chilling mystery tied to Silent Hollow Lake occurred in 1994. To understand the gravity of what happened, one must first delve into the life of Sophia, a vibrant and determined 20-year-old with an insatiable curiosity. Her passion for uncovering truths and telling stories set her apart in Hollow Creek, a town where most people preferred to let sleeping secrets lie. Sophia grew up in a modest two-story house on Birchwood Lane, one of the few streets where the occasional laughter of children could still be heard. Her parents, Martha and Henry, were practical folk who ran the local hardware store. They adored their only child, though they often worried about her adventurous spirit and relentless drive to dig where others dared not tread. Hollow Creek, after all, was a town steeped in whispers, a place where tales of haunted woods and cursed lakes were told not for entertainment, but as cautionary reminders. Sophia's fascination with journalism began early. By the age of 10, she was creating a weekly newsletter for her neighborhood, complete with hand-drawn illustrations and interviews with her neighbors. By high school, she was the editor of the school paper, frequently butting heads with the administration over stories they deemed too controversial. Her dream was to become an investigative journalist for a major publication, uncovering the kind of truths that could change lives. One of Sophia's closest friends was Grace, a quiet and thoughtful girl who often served as a grounding force for Sophia's more impulsive tendencies. Grace was the one who introduced Sophia to the legends surrounding Silent Hollow Lake. They had been sitting in the town library one rainy afternoon, poring over dusty volumes of local folklore for a school project. Grace pointed to a passage about the lake, her voice hushed as though speaking too loudly might summon something dark. "They say the lake doesn't just take people," Grace murmured. "It keeps them. Like they're trapped somehow." Sophia's curiosity was immediately piqued. "Trapped how?" she pressed. But Grace had only shrugged, unwilling to delve deeper into something that made her uneasy. For Sophia, however, it was the beginning of an obsession. She spent weeks combing through old newspapers, piecing together stories of those who had disappeared near the lake. The accounts were sparse but chilling: a fisherman in 1954, a couple in 1963, a hiker in 1974. And then, nothing for 2 decades. Until now. By the summer of 1994, rumors of cult activity in the evergreen forest began circulating through the town. People spoke of strange symbols carved into trees, gutted animal carcasses found near the lake, and shadowy figures spotted at dusk. To most, these were just stories, wild imaginings or perhaps pranks by bored teenagers. To Sophia, they were leads. "You're going too far this time, Soph," Grace warned one afternoon as the two of them sat in the diner, their usual spot in the corner booth by the window. Sophia had spread out a collection of maps and old newspaper clippings on the table, her notebook open and pen in hand. Her excitement was palpable, but Grace's expression was one of concern. "Come on, Grace," Sophia countered, brushing her auburn hair out of her face. "You know there's something going on out there. Look at this." She tapped a newspaper article with her pen. The headline read, "Unexplained disappearances continue to plague Silent Hollow Lake." "And look at this," Sophia added, pointing to a map of the area. She'd circled a dozen spots around the lake where strange occurrences had been reported. "There's a pattern. Everything happens within a mile of the lake, and most of it's on the north side, where the forest is thickest." Grace sighed, sipping her milkshake. "I'm just saying, maybe it's not worth it. People disappear there, Sophia. It's not just a story. It's real." Sophia leaned back in her seat, her expression softening. "That's exactly why I have to do this." Someone needs to find out the truth. If it's not me, who else is going to care enough to try? Grace didn't argue further. She knew it would be futile. Once Sophia set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Sophia spent most of her time preparing for her investigation. She borrowed books from the library on local history and folklore, interviewed older residents who remembered the earlier disappearances, and even managed to get her hands on a police report about a missing hiker from 1974. What stood out to her were the descriptions of symbols found near the lake, carved into trees and rocks. They matched sketches she'd seen in other reports, always described as occult-like but never conclusively identified. On the evening of December 20, 1994, the night before the winter solstice, Sophia was seen at the diner for the last time. She'd arrived alone, carrying her trusty backpack and an air of determined focus. The waitress, a kindly woman named Betty, later recalled Sophia sitting in her usual booth, scribbling in her notebook and sipping coffee. She looked like she was on a mission, Betty would tell reporters later. I asked if she needed anything else, and she just smiled and said, "No, thank you, I've got everything I need." I didn't think much of it at the time. If I'd known, her voice would trail off, heavy with regret. Sophia left the diner around 9 p.m., her backpack slung over one shoulder. Witnesses saw her heading toward the north side of Silent Hollow Lake, the area she'd marked on her map as the epicenter of the strange occurrences. She carried with her a flashlight, her notebook, and a sense of purpose that burned brighter than the cold December night. What happened next remains a mystery. Her parents reported her missing the following morning when she failed to return home. A search party was organized, but all they found was her backpack on the shore of the lake. Inside were her notebook, detailing her findings and theories, her flashlight, its batteries dead, and an old photograph of a hooded figure standing by the water, its origin unknown. The investigation that followed was thorough but fruitless. Divers searched the lake, their visibility hampered by its murky depths. Volunteers combed the surrounding forest, calling Sophia's name into the eerie silence. The police interviewed everyone who'd seen her that night, but no one had answers. The only clues were the symbols carved into the trees near where her backpack was found, matching those she'd documented in her notebook. The town was left to grapple with its loss, and Sophia's story became another tragic legend of Hollow Creek, the bright light of her life extinguished too soon. But for those who knew her, she was not just a name in a story. She was a daughter, a friend, a dreamer, and for those who believe in the power of memory, she remains a beacon, her voice still calling out for the truth from beyond the veil of Silent Hollow Lake. For weeks, the search for Sophia gripped the town of Hollow Creek. Authorities launched an exhaustive operation. Divers plunged into the icy, foreboding depths of Silent Hollow Lake, their lights piercing the murky water but finding nothing. Volunteers combed the sprawling forests that encircled the lake, calling Sophia's name into the void, their voices swallowed by the endless expanse of trees. Despite their tireless efforts, no trace of Sophia emerged, not a scrap of clothing, not a single clue beyond her abandoned backpack. The disappearance left the town in a state of collective unease, the mystery casting a dark shadow over the community. Rumors began to swirl, feeding the imaginations of the townsfolk. Some believed that Sophia had stumbled upon the cult she'd been investigating and paid the ultimate price for her curiosity. Others whispered about the lake's sinister reputation, claiming it had claimed her as it had so many before. Older residents spoke in hushed tones about the lake's hunger, recounting eerie tales of its restless waters that seemed to lure the unwary to their doom. The lack of closure fanned these speculations, turning Sophia's disappearance into a legend. As time passed, the town began to move on, or at least pretended to. Sophia became a name spoken with a mixture of sorrow and unease, a cautionary tale for the younger generation. Her story joined the ranks of other strange occurrences in Hollow Creek's long history, a town where the line between reality and folklore often blurred. In 2020, Sophia's case resurfaced, drawing fresh attention thanks to Ellie, a determined true crime blogger. Ellie had a reputation for diving headfirst into unsolved mysteries, peeling back layers of time to uncover hidden truths. When she stumbled upon Sophia's story, it immediately captivated her. The parallels between Sophia's dreams of investigative journalism and Ellie's own passion for uncovering the truth created an almost personal connection. Ellie felt compelled to finish what Sophia had started. Ellie's investigation began with research, hours spent poring over old news clippings, police reports, and the sparse online records about Sophia's disappearance. She reached out to Hollow Creek's residents, especially those who'd been around in 1994. Many were reluctant to revisit the painful past, brushing off her questions with muttered excuses or outright refusals. But Ellie's persistence paid off, and she managed to interview a handful of individuals who shared fragmented recollections. Mrs. Carter, the owner of the diner where Sophia had last been seen, described the teenager as bright and curious, a girl with stars in her eyes. She recounted how Sophia had spent hours in a booth, maps and clippings spread out before her, occasionally jotting notes in a worn leather journal. She was so determined, Mrs. Carter said, her voice tinged with regret. I told her to be careful. This town. It's not always kind to people who dig too deep. Ellie also tracked down Lucas, Sophia's childhood friend. Lucas admitted he'd been worried about Sophia's obsession with occult rumors. She'd been reading about disappearances around the lake, he said, and she'd found something that spooked her. She wouldn't tell me what, just said it was important. I tried to talk her out of going to the lake, but she wouldn't listen. Lucas's voice faltered as he recounted their last conversation, guilt etched on his face. If I'd stayed with her that night, maybe. As Ellie pieced together Sophia's final days, she noticed a disturbing pattern. Every 10 years, someone disappeared near Silent Hollow Lake, always on the night of the winter solstice. The victims varied in age and background, but the circumstances were eerily similar. No signs of struggle, no bodies recovered. Ellie began to wonder if the disappearances were connected to something far more sinister than a simple urban legend. Determined to uncover the truth, Ellie decided to retrace Sophia's steps. She revisited the diner, examining the booth where Sophia had worked, imagining the teenager's thoughts and fears as she planned her investigation. She ventured into the forest, following the trails that volunteers had scoured decades earlier, the oppressive silence of the woods pressing down on her. At last, she stood on the shore of Silent Hollow Lake, the water's surface eerily still, reflecting the grey winter sky. Ellie's research led her to the town's library, where she delved into archived records. Among dusty tomes and forgotten files, she discovered a series of old photographs, one of which made her blood run cold. It was the same image found in Sophia's backpack, a hooded figure standing by the lake, their face obscured, symbols etched into the hem of their cloak. The photograph's date, December 21, 1984, aligned with another disappearance. Ellie's hands shook as she realized the implications. On the night of the winter solstice, Ellie decided to spend the night at the lake, determined to capture evidence. Armed with her camera, a digital recorder, and an overwhelming sense of dread, she set up camp on the shoreline. As the hours passed, the air grew colder, and an unnatural fog began to roll in, obscuring the lake and the surrounding forest. Midnight came, and with it, an eerie stillness. Then, faint whispers began to drift through the fog, too indistinct to decipher but unmistakably human. Ellie's camera recorded everything, but it wasn't until she reviewed the footage later that she noticed something chilling. A shadowy figure lingered at the edge of the frame, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The figure's presence sent shivers down Ellie's spine, confirming her worst fears. There was something, or someone, at the lake, and it was watching her. Days after Ellie's visit, a fisherman made a horrifying discovery. Tangled in the reeds near the shoreline was a body, perfectly preserved despite decades in the water. DNA tests confirmed it was Sophia. The preservation defied explanation, as if time itself had paused for her. Clutched in Sophia's hand was a locket engraved with the same symbols Ellie had seen on the hooded figure's photograph. The revelation sent shockwaves through Hollow Creek. Theories about what had happened to Sophia ranged from the supernatural to the conspiratorial. Had she been held by a cult for all those years? Did the lake possess some malevolent force that defied natural laws? The symbols on the locket added another layer of mystery, their origins and meanings unknown. Ellie's investigation brought her both acclaim and unease. While she'd uncovered vital clues, the questions far outweighed the answers. The discovery of Sophia's body only deepened the mystery of Silent Hollow Lake, a place where time, reality, and reason seemed to unravel. To this day, the people of Hollow Creek avoid the lake, especially on solstice nights. The whispers persist, carried on the wind, a chilling reminder of the lake's dark legacy. For those who hear them, one thing is clear. Silent Hollow Lake is a place where the past refuses to rest, and its secrets remain as impenetrable as its icy depths. Ellie made her decision with a mix of apprehension and determination. She would spend the winter solstice night by Silent Hollow Lake, documenting everything she could. This wasn't just another mystery to unravel. It felt personal now. Sophia's story, the enigmatic disappearances, and the strange symbols were all threads she couldn't let go of. She arrived at the lake just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in streaks of crimson and gold that faded into an ominous gray. The lake was unnervingly silent, as though it were holding its breath. Ellie set up her equipment carefully, a tripod-mounted camera facing the water, a digital recorder placed on the ground to capture ambient sound, and a notebook to jot down observations. The air was crisp, each breath forming clouds of condensation, and the surrounding forest felt alive with an invisible tension. Even the faint rustling of leaves seemed amplified in the stillness. As the hours ticked by, Ellie's nerves began to fray. The isolation pressed down on her, and her mind played tricks, shapes shifting in the shadows, branches creaking like footsteps. She tried to focus, scribbling notes in her journal about the lake's eerie stillness and the oppressive weight of the fog that had begun to creep in, curling along the shoreline like ghostly fingers. At precisely midnight, a transformation occurred. The fog thickened dramatically, enveloping the lake and surrounding area in a dense, impenetrable veil. The air grew colder, and Ellie could feel the chill seeping through her layers of clothing, biting into her skin. The whispers began faintly, barely discernible over the distant rustle of the trees. At first, Ellie thought it was the wind, but the cadence was unmistakably human. Fragmented voices, layered atop one another, speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Her heart pounded as she switched on her recorder, the red light blinking steadily in the darkness. She scanned the shoreline through her camera's viewfinder, adjusting the focus in hopes of capturing something. Anything. The whispers grew louder, yet still remained elusive, as though they came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ellie's breathing quickened, the tension mounting with every passing second. Then, she saw it. A shadowy figure emerged at the edge of the lake, barely distinguishable through the fog. It was tall, its form obscured, but what struck Ellie were its eyes, two faintly glowing orbs that seemed to pierce the darkness, fixed directly on her. She froze, her hand trembling on the camera. The figure didn't move, yet its presence felt overwhelming, oppressive, as though it were more than just a physical being. Ellie's instincts screamed at her to run, but her curiosity rooted her to the spot. She raised her camera, snapping several shots in quick succession, the shutter clicks unnaturally loud in the silence. The figure remained motionless for what felt like an eternity before slowly receding into the fog, vanishing as though it had never been there. The whispers faded with it, leaving Ellie alone in a silence that felt even more unsettling than the sound. Ellie packed her equipment with shaking hands, her fear finally overpowering her resolve. She fled back to her car, parked a short distance away, her flashlight beam bouncing erratically through the trees. By the time she reached the relative safety of the vehicle, her mind was racing, replaying the encounter over and over. What had she seen? Who, or what, was the figure? And why had it appeared to her? Reviewing her footage the next day, Ellie's unease deepened. The whispers were clearly audible on the recording, their layered tones sending chills down her spine. But it was the video that unsettled her most. In the frame where she'd seen the figure, it was there, a tall, shadowy silhouette with those faintly glowing eyes. The fog obscured most details, but there was no mistaking its presence. Ellie paused the footage, staring at the figure, her mind racing with questions. Why had it come? Was it connected to the disappearances? To Sophia? 2 days later, news broke of a grim discovery. A fisherman, navigating the reeds along the lake's edge, had found a body. The authorities were quick to respond, cordoning off the area as word spread through the town. Ellie watched from a distance, her heart sinking as she realized the implications. When the DNA results came back, they confirmed what she already suspected. The body was Sophia's. The condition of Sophia's remains defied explanation. Despite being submerged for decades, she looked as though she'd only been in the water a matter of days. Her skin was pale but intact, her hair still flowing around her shoulders. The coroner's report would later state that there were no signs of decomposition, a fact that baffled forensic experts. Clutched in Sophia's hand was an object that only deepened the mystery, a locket, intricately engraved with symbols that matched the ones Ellie had seen in the hooded figure's photograph. Ellie was shaken. The discovery should have brought closure, but instead, it raised more questions. What had happened to Sophia during those lost years? How had her body remained so preserved? And what was the significance of the locket? Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that the figure she'd seen held the answers, but the thought of returning to the lake filled her with dread. The townspeople reacted with a mix of fear and resignation. For them, the lake's dark reputation had been vindicated, its secrets now more tangible than ever. Many avoided discussing the discovery, unwilling to confront the reality of what it implied. Others whispered about the lake's curse, their superstitions reinvigorated by the chilling details of Sophia's recovery. Ellie's blog post about the experience went viral, drawing attention from true crime enthusiasts and paranormal investigators alike. She recounted her night at the lake in vivid detail, including the shadowy figure and the eerie whispers. The post ended with a question that haunted her readers as much as it haunted her. What does Silent Hollow Lake want? For Ellie, the investigation was far from over. Sophia's locket, the symbols, the figure, they all pointed to something larger, something more sinister. But with every answer, the lake seemed to offer more mysteries in return. Silent Hollow Lake remained an enigma, its depths guarding secrets that no one dared to uncover. To this day, Ellie's footage of the solstice night stands as both evidence and warning. The whispers, the figure, the discovery of Sophia, they paint a picture of a place where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural blurs. And as the winter solstice approaches each year, the people of Hollow Creek brace themselves, knowing the lake's hunger is never truly sated. The case remains unsolved. What happened to Sophia during those decades? Was she held by the cult, or did the lake itself play a role in her disappearance? Locals avoid the lake more than ever, warning outsiders to stay away, especially on solstice nights. To this day, whispers echo through Hollow Creek. Once the lake takes you, it never lets you go. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. It's free, and you'll never miss a mystery. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.